Codependent No More: How to Stop Controlling Others and Start Caring for Yourself, by Melody Beattie. Introduction. Picture this for a moment. A woman named Jessica is sitting in her kitchen. The sun is shining outside, but inside, everything is gray. The dishes are piled up, the laundry is waiting, but she can't move. An invisible weight is pressing down on her, a fatigue so deep that just combing her hair feels like climbing a mountain. So she goes back to bed. It's the only escape. But when she wakes up, the pain rushes back in. It's a bitter cocktail of emotions: rage at her husband for his drinking and his lies, despair that God has abandoned her, and a deep, gnawing fear that she's trapped, with no way out. She thinks, it's all his fault. If he would just get better, I would feel better. But here's the twist. Her husband is getting better. He's been sober for 6 months, going to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. He's changing. But Jessica, she's not. In fact, she's feeling worse. The anger, the exhaustion, the feeling of being used up and invisible, it's all still there. And she's starting to ask the most terrifying question of all: what if he isn't the problem anymore? What if the problem is now me? Jessica's story is the heart of a book that landed like a quiet thunderclap in 1986 and has since sold over 5 million copies worldwide. The book is Codependent No More, and its author, Melody Beattie, didn't just write about this struggle, she lived it. She was an alcoholic and addict herself, who stormed through life creating the very people she would later write about. She survived addiction, abuse, divorce, and even the heartbreaking loss of her young son. She wrote this book while on welfare, a single mother trying to make sense of her own pain. What she discovered and shared with the world was a name for that invisible force that had trapped Jessica, and millions like her. A force that makes us care so much about others that we forget to care for ourselves. A force that turns love into control, and compassion into exhaustion. She called it codependency. Today, we're going to step into the world of this landmark book. And I promise you, by the end of our time together, you will understand this powerful dynamic that shapes so many of our relationships, often without us even realizing it. More importantly, you will learn the first, most crucial steps to breaking free, finding your own balance, and learning how to live your own life, fully and joyfully. Book summary. Have you ever felt like your mood for the entire day depends on someone else's? Maybe it's a parent, a friend, or a significant other. If they're happy, you can relax. But if they're upset, you feel this urgent, anxious need to fix it, to make them feel better. You feel responsible. Or maybe you've known someone who seems to be a magnet for troubled people. Like a man named Gerald, who was handsome, successful, and could have dated anyone he wanted. But he consistently fell in love with women who treated him poorly, women who were struggling with their own addictions. He'd spend all his energy trying to help them, trying to control their drinking, only to end up angry and hurt, wondering, why does this always happen to me? These stories, along with Jessica's, all point to the same quiet struggle. Melody Beattie defines a codependent person with beautiful simplicity. It is someone who has let another person's behavior affect them, and who is obsessed with controlling that person's behavior. It's not just about being in a relationship with an alcoholic, though that's where the term originated. It can happen with anyone: a parent with chronic illness, a rebellious teenager, a friend who's always in crisis, or even a perfectly normal person whose moods you absorb like a sponge. At its core, codependency is a reactionary process. Codependents don't act, they react. They react to other people's problems, their feelings, their choices. They spend so much time reacting to the world around them that they forget to live a life of their own. So how does this show up in our day-to-day lives? The book lays out some powerful, and often uncomfortably familiar, characteristics. Let's not think of them as a checklist to label yourself, but as signposts on a map that can help you understand the territory you might be in. The first and most powerful signpost is what Beattie calls caretaking. This isn't the same as genuine, healthy caring. Caretaking is a compulsive need to manage other people's lives. Codependents feel responsible for other people's feelings, thoughts, and even their destiny. They anticipate needs before they're even expressed. They say yes when every fiber of their being is screaming no. They do more than their fair share of the work, and then feel angry and resentful when nobody does the same for them. This pattern creates something the book calls the Cartman drama triangle, a toxic dance with three roles: the rescuer, the persecutor, and the victim. As codependents, we love to start as the rescuer. We jump in to solve someone else's problem, often a problem they could and should solve themselves. We do it because it gives us a temporary hit of self-worth. We don't feel lovable, so we settle for being needed. But here's the trap. The person we rescue rarely appreciates it the way we think they should. They might even resent it, because our help sends a subtle message: you're incompetent. You can't handle your own life. When they don't show enough gratitude, or when our help doesn't work, we shift roles. We become the persecutor. We get angry, resentful, and critical. After all I've done for you, we think, this is the thanks I get? And that leads us directly to the final, inevitable role: the victim. We feel used, unappreciated, helpless, and sorry for ourselves. We wonder, why does this always happen to me? The heartbreaking irony is that we set the whole cycle in motion ourselves, by taking on a responsibility that was never ours to begin with. This leads to the second major signpost: a deep-seated feeling of low self-worth. Codependents are relentlessly hard on themselves. They blame themselves for everything. They reject compliments, convinced they're not good enough. Many come from dysfunctional families where their needs weren't met, and they carry that feeling of being unimportant into their adult lives. They don't feel worthy of good things, so they get their sense of value from helping others. But it's an artificial self-worth, one that evaporates the moment the person they're helping fails or rejects them. The third signpost is the anxious mind, which shows up as obsession and control. Because the world around them feels so chaotic and out of control, especially when living with someone who is unpredictable, codependents try to manage everything. They worry constantly. They check up on people. They try to catch them in misbehavior. Their minds are like a hamster on a wheel, spinning with thoughts of what someone else is doing, thinking, or feeling. They believe, deep down, that they know best how things should turn out, and they try to control people through guilt, manipulation, advice-giving, or even helplessness. But control is an illusion. Melody Beattie tells the story of Maria, whose husband was a binge drinker. He only seemed to drink when she wasn't around. So Maria made a decision: to control his drinking, she would never leave his side. She became a recluse, turning down travel, church conferences, even trips to the grocery store. She was a guard in her own home. But of course, he still found ways to drink. Then one day, he told her that if she got a job to help with their financial stress, he wouldn't feel the need to drink anymore. Reluctantly, she did. And she started to thrive. She was good at her job, she enjoyed the people, she felt a flicker of her old self coming back. But soon, that old, familiar anxiety crept in. Her husband was about to drink again. She started making frantic calls. He wasn't at work. He hadn't picked up the kids. The next morning, she walked into her new job and quit, rushing back home to stand guard again. She thought she was controlling him. But who was really in control? His alcoholism was controlling her. It dictated where she went, what she did, and how she felt. In the attempt to control him, she had completely lost control of her own life. The final signpost is what makes all of this possible: an emotional shutdown. This appears as repression and denial. To survive the constant pain, disappointment, and chaos, many codependents learn to push their feelings down. They become afraid to be who they are. They ignore problems or pretend they aren't happening. They tell themselves things will be better tomorrow. They feel crazy because they are living in a world of lies, both the ones they're told and the ones they tell themselves. They don't know what they're feeling anymore. As one woman in the book says, "I used to openly express my emotions. Now, after 8 years in this relationship, I couldn't tell you what I was feeling if my life depended on it." So, if this is the trap, this cycle of caretaking, low self-worth, control, and denial, how do we get out? This is where the book shifts from diagnosis to healing, and the journey begins with one deceptively simple, yet profoundly powerful concept: detachment. Now, when most people hear the word detachment, they think of being cold, distant, and uncaring. But Beattie is clear: that's not it at all. Detachment isn't a hostile withdrawal. It isn't giving up in despair. As one Al-Anon member beautifully put it, it is not detaching from the person you care about, but from the agony of the involvement. Detachment is the act of mentally, emotionally, and sometimes physically disengaging from the unhealthy entanglement with another person's life and responsibilities. It's based on a radical premise: each person is responsible for themselves. We can't solve problems that aren't ours to solve. And worrying doesn't help. Detachment means you adopt a hands-off policy. You allow people to face the consequences of their own actions. You let them be who they are, giving them the freedom to grow, and you give yourself that same freedom. You do what you can to solve a problem, and then you let it go. You focus on what is good in your life, right now, and you learn to live in spite of unsolved problems. It's about learning not to be blown about by every wind. Most codependents live in a constant state of reaction. Someone is angry, so you become anxious. Someone is sad, so you feel compelled to cheer them up. You forfeit your own peace at the whim of your environment. Detachment is about reclaiming that peace. It's learning to pause before you react. In that pause, you find your power. You get to choose how you want to feel, think, and act, instead of letting someone else's behavior dictate your life. Once we begin to practice detachment, the next step becomes possible: to set yourself free. This is about letting go of that illusion of control. You can't control another person's drinking, their eating habits, their choices, their feelings, or their thoughts. You just can't. And the moment you stop trying to do the impossible, you free up an enormous amount of energy to do the possible: change yourself. This frees you to focus on the only person you truly have any business controlling: yourself. This is the heart of the book's message. It's a shift from being other-centered to being self-centered, not in a selfish way, but in a self-caring way. It's about learning to live your own life. For many codependents, this is a terrifying prospect. They've been so wrapped up in other people for so long that they've forgotten who they are. They don't know what they want or need. The book's advice is simple: start asking. In any given situation, detach and ask yourself, what do I need to do right now to take care of myself? Maybe the answer is to take a walk. Maybe it's to say no to a request. Maybe it's to finally make that doctor's appointment you've been putting off. It's about learning to listen to that quiet inner voice you've been ignoring for so long. And a huge part of learning to listen to that voice is learning to have a love affair with yourself. This means dismantling that inner critic that tells you you're not good enough. It means accepting yourself, flaws and all. It means understanding that you are not a mistake. You are worthy of love, happiness, and a life that is your own, not just an extension of someone else's. Of course, this journey isn't a straight line. It's a process of learning to feel again. Codependents are masters of repressing their emotions. The book encourages us to gently welcome them back, all of them. Especially the most difficult one, anger. Many codependents are terrified of anger, both their own and others. But Beattie makes a powerful point. Of course you're angry. Anyone who has tolerated what you've tolerated would be angry. Anger is a signal. It's telling you that a boundary has been crossed, that a need isn't being met. The goal isn't to stop being angry. It's to learn how to listen to your anger and use its energy to take responsible action to care for yourself. Finally, the book gently points toward a powerful resource for this journey: 12-step programs. Programs like Al-Anon, which is for families and friends of alcoholics, are built on the same principles of detachment, self-care, and spiritual reliance that fill the pages of Codependent No More. Beattie shares a beautiful analogy for how these programs work, which she heard at a meeting. Imagine you're on a shore, and across the water is an island called Serenity. You desperately want to get there. You have two choices. There's a big fancy ocean liner called Therapy, and it looks great. Then there's a group of people on the beach who look like they're rowing, but you can't see a boat or any oars. They're just sitting there, happily rowing an invisible boat. You, of course, choose the ocean liner. It takes you halfway across, but then it stops, turns around, and takes you back to shore. The captain tells you, "Sorry, our cruise only goes so far. The only way to get to that island is in that invisible boat." So, you walk over to the people on the beach. They tell you to get in. You say you can't see the boat. They say, "Get in anyway." They tell you to pick up an oar and start rowing. You say you can't see the oars. They say, "Pick them up and row anyway." And so you do. You start going through the motions. And pretty soon, you start to see the boat. Then you see the oars. And before you know it, you're so happy just rowing with these people that you almost don't care if you ever get to the island. That's the journey of recovery from codependency. It's a journey of taking steps you might not understand at first, of trusting a process, and of finding that the real destination isn't some far-off island of perfection, but the peace and strength you discover within yourself along the way. It's about learning to live and love again, but this time, in a way that includes loving yourself. Commentary. When you step back and look at Codependent No More, you realize it's much more than a self-help book from the 1980s. It's a timeless manual for anyone who has ever loved someone so much that they lost themselves in the process. Its message is, in many ways, more critical today than it was when it was first written. We live in a culture that often glorifies self-sacrifice, especially in relationships. We're told that love means putting someone else's needs before our own, always. But Melody Beattie draws a crucial line in the sand. She shows us the difference between healthy, compassionate giving, and the self-destructive pattern of caretaking that ultimately depletes us and enables the very behavior we're trying to stop. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the paradox of control. The book brilliantly illustrates that the more we try to control another person, the more we are controlled by them. Our every thought, our every action, our every emotion becomes a reaction to them. We become a puppet, and their problems are pulling the strings. The only way to cut those strings is to let go, to practice detachment. This isn't about giving up on people you love. It's about giving up the illusion that you can run their lives for them. It's about having the courage to say, "I love you, and because I love you, I will not stand between you and the consequences of your choices. And because I love myself, I will no longer allow your choices to destroy my peace." That is a profound act of love for both people involved. So, How can you start applying these ideas in your own life, right now? It doesn't require a dramatic overhaul. It starts with small, quiet shifts. Here are 3 simple actions you can take today. First, practice the pause. The next time you feel that frantic urge to jump in, to fix a problem that isn't yours, to manage someone else's feelings, just stop. Take 1 deep breath. In that moment of stillness, ask yourself a simple question. Is this my responsibility? Just asking the question can be enough to break the compulsive cycle. Second, start a conversation with yourself. At least 3 times today, maybe once in the morning, once at lunch, and once before bed, ask yourself, what do I need right now? Beattie stresses this throughout the book. We are so attuned to the needs of others that we are deaf to our own. The answer might be incredibly simple. A glass of water. 5 minutes of silence. A walk around the block. This isn't selfish. It is the fundamental practice of learning to care for the only person you are with 24 hours a day. Third, say no to 1 small thing. Find a low-stakes request this week, something you would normally agree to out of a sense of obligation or to avoid disappointing someone, and politely decline. You don't need a long excuse. A simple, "I'm sorry, I can't do that right now," is enough. Notice how it feels. It might feel uncomfortable, even scary at first. But it is also the feeling of you taking back your own power, 1 small decision at a time. Ultimately, the journey described in Codependent No More is not a journey toward selfishness. It's a journey toward wholeness. It's about understanding that you cannot pour from an empty cup. By learning to detach, to set boundaries, and to care for your own needs, you are not abandoning others. You are finally filling your own cup, so that the love and support you give comes from a place of genuine strength and abundance, not from a place of depletion and resentment. It's about learning that the most loving thing you can do for anyone is to first be true to yourself. That was a summary of Codependent No More by Melody Beattie. We've covered the core ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It can show you the landmarks, but it can't give you the feeling of the sun on your skin or the sound of the local music. The true power of this book is in the quiet moments of reading it, when one of Beattie's stories or a simple, honest phrase makes you see your own life in a new light. This summary is your map. If anything we've talked about today has made you curious about the journey, I encourage you to pick up the book. Reading it isn't just about learning concepts, it's an experience that can genuinely help you reclaim your own life. Also, if you found this exploration valuable, please take a moment to subscribe and perhaps share it with someone who might need to hear this message. We're all on a journey of growth, and the best way to travel is together. Thank you for listening, and let's keep learning.